While Turkey is not the only Syrian neighbor at risk of getting drawn into the conflict, it's been revealed that a task force of around 150 American military planners and other personnel have been secretly deployed to Jordan. For more on the latest developments around Syria, let's talk to independent journalist and author Niall Bowie, who's in the region and joins us live from Tehran. Thank you for joining us today. Now, a U.S. defense official has confirmed the presence of an American military team in Jordan. What exactly do you think is its purpose? Mere protection of the border or preparation for involvement in the conflict, perhaps?
Thanks for having me on. Throughout the duration of the conflict in Syria, we've heard a lot of talk about the creation of humanitarian corridors or buffer zones along the Turkish border, and now we're hearing reports of the same being established on the Jordanian border. So ostensibly, that is what the American personnel in Jordan are there to do. But one needs to acknowledge the fact that this is not the policy of the Turkish government, nor is it the policy of the Jordanian government. The U.S. think tank, the Brookings Institute, in March 2012 published a report titled Assessing Regime Change Options in Syria, where they specifically cite the creation of a buffer zone or humanitarian corridor as a means to base certain rebel groups in the region to project force towards the Syrian government in an attempt to topple it. So that appears to be what is playing out at the moment.
Now, a growing number of neighboring countries appear to be getting closer to getting dragged into the Syrian conflict. How significant is the danger of violence spilling across the border, not just in isolated incidents, but on a much larger scale?
Well, the possibility of a wider regional war is something that myself and many other independent analysts have predicted and warned against for the past several months. We have to look at what the Turkish government has done recently. And recently, we have lawmakers in Ankara. They've passed this carte blanche legislation that allows the Turkish government to essentially conduct operations within Syrian territory. And I think this is an extremely dangerous turn of events. And I think that the goal here is really to pull Iran into the picture. And we know that the Syrian government has warned against the use they've claimed that they will use chemical weapons if they're attacked by outside forces. So ostensibly, Iran will get involved if this happens.
And Niall, focusing on Syria itself now, where the terror attacks are intensifying, an al-Qaeda-linked group, the Al-Nusra Front, has claimed responsibility for the latest string of deadly blasts near Damascus. To what extent are al-Qaeda affiliates a driving force behind the rebel fight?
Well, you know, it's funny. The Free Syrian Army has recently issued statements denying that they have any link to these extremist groups. But if you look at what they've done, it's on record that they've committed the same kind of atrocities that these extremist groups are committing. So that's extrajudicial assassination, that's desecrating religious sites, that's targeting religious minorities and loyalists of the Assad government. So essentially here, what I think is happening is that the Syrian government is being credited for these cases of violence and this extremism. And if we look at the conflict on a larger level, what we're having is urban guerrilla warfare in very populated residential areas. So the high death toll being reported in this conflict, I think, is attributable to many civilians being unfortunately killed in the crossfire.
Now, very briefly, Niall, in Libya, we've seen all fingers pointed at al-Qaeda following the attack on the U.S. consulate, and yet we haven't been seeing any condemnation of these terror attacks from the West. Why are all the links to the terror group really being ignored now when it concerns Syria?
Well, essentially, they've been blocked. The West and the NATO countries, the United States, have been blocked from overtly conducting regime change means as a result of the veto by Russia and China in the UN Security Council. So they've placed all of their cards, they put all of their eggs in this basket of al-Qaeda and all these other terrorist groups, which they hope will target and topple the Syrian government. But if Washington continues to pursue this kind of policy, which can only be described as pathological, I think they ought to give a heads up to the next U.S. ambassador to Syria and tell him not to visit.
All right, Niall Bowie, independent journalist and author, thank you for your time.
Cheers.